Welcome to, that was just a notification that recording is in progress, which also usually shows up on the screen, but did not this time. But this session, like all our sessions or most of our sessions, is recorded and it's available on our website under programs about usually 2 to 3 weeks after the event itself. It takes a little while for Lauren to make the captions as perfect as possible. It's really fun to watch them on the website later on. So just a little bit of business first. If anyone is having trouble with accommodations, if you know how to raise your hand and say so, or of course you probably can't hear me if you're having trouble with accommodations, or put it in the chat. We do have stream text for so that you can set the captions up in a larger font on a different on an iPad or I think on a phone. So if anyone wants that, the link to stream text is in the chat as well. We have a big panel here who I'm going to introduce in a minute. But just when we get to questions, we would like to wait until everybody has a chance to do their presentation. When we get to questions, if you would raise your hand electronically, it's by far the best way to keep the meeting orderly at that point. The way to do that is at the bottom of your screen, you'll see reactions. And if you click on that, you'll see a little yellow raised hand icon. So just click on that. If you remember, click on it when you're finished talking. If you don't remember, we'll just assume you've just forgotten to turn it off. And David is explaining stream text right now in the chat if anybody wants to take a look at that. It's fine to have just not to have your faces visible, especially because during our presentations, because most people are on speaker anyway. But when we get to the Q&A, if you don't mind making your video visible, it kind of adds to the feeling of collegiality in our group. It's not as good as all being together in person, but it's at least we can see each other. Those are the only things that I have to say. We have our program tonight is facilitated by Carolyn Ginsberg Stern. She is the Director of Outreach and Strategic Initiatives at the Center for Hearing and Communication, CHC, here in New York, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. Carolyn has been at CHC quite a while, but prior to working at CHC, she had an extensive career in product management and marketing roles at American Express and at other large corporations. She earned her MBA at Columbia University School of Business and her BA at Northwestern. And as I read these introductions, just keep in mind that all of our speakers are going to talk about their own experiences with hearing loss in the workplace. So these backgrounds are relevant. Vanessa Kelly is a former chapter board member. She's a practicing corporate lawyer and a deaf disability advocate. She's a member of the America's Disability Network leadership team, where she focuses on disability inclusion initiatives, including marketing, reverse mentoring, and disability-specific community groups. She also creates educational programming and training, and she participates in disability recruiting initiatives, and she implements disability inclusive policies and procedures. Laura Friedman is currently a Senior Vice President for Communications and People Strategy. I'm not saying this right, Laura. Senior Vice President, Communications and People Strategy Lead for Markets Technology at Citigroup. And prior to joining Citi, she was the Associate Director of Communications at Workforce Opportunity Services. And she also was the Communications and Programs Manager at the Hearing Health Foundation, which many of you may be familiar with. Maria Lagi, I hope I got that right, retired in 2010 after a long career as an arts administrator, including 15 years with Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts and Film at Lincoln Center. She's currently a fundraising consultant to arts and social service nonprofits, and she's a volunteer at the Center for Hearing and Communications and a board member of the Volunteer Referral Center. And finally, Dr. Michelle DeStefano is Director of Audiology at CHC with over 25 years of experience helping people manage hearing loss in the workplace. She treats both children and adults. So I'm going to mute myself and turn this over to Carolyn. Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to start now our session, Succeeding with Hearing Loss in the Workplace. So Catherine shared a lot about my background, but we wanted to all the panelists will describe ourselves for anyone who might need that. And then I'm just get the program started. So I have brown, straight, shoulder-length hair with dark brown glasses, and I'm wearing a black jacket and a black shirt underneath it. And I just wanted to share just a little bit about my my hearing loss. I have a progressive hearing loss, but at this point I'm deaf, and I have 2 cochlear implants, which have tremendously helped me with my functioning and my working and just being able to have a full-led life. And what I wanted to share was just a little bit about the organization I work for, the Center for Hearing Communication. For those of you who don't know about us, we refer to ourselves as CHC, it's our nickname. And we're a nonprofit hearing rehabilitation agency that empowers people with hearing loss of all degrees and modes of communication, and through a range of high quality services, including audiology, speech and language, education, and emotional health and wellness. CHC helps people connect to the world around them and succeed in life. Services are provided through telehealth and in person at our New York City clinic based at 50 Broadway downtown. And we also have a location in Fort Lauderdale. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the purpose of the program. And before I do that, I have to thank Catherine and the entire New York City chapter board of HLAA and Vanessa for conceiving this program and inviting CHC to be a part of it, and all the other panelists as well. So thank you for that. I think it's a really important topic, and I'm glad that we're spending time on it tonight. So the purpose of the discussion today is to learn about what it takes to succeed in the workplace with a hearing loss, and learn from people who are doing it currently and have several years of experience. And hopefully everyone in the audience can take away 1 or 2 or 3 learnings that they can apply to their own workplace situations. I wanted to let you know that for tonight's session, we've brought in the definition of what workplace means. And for us, it means any place where work is conducted regularly, whether it's paid work, volunteering, or community service. Because all of us know we have to hear well in just about every aspect of our life for it to be meaningful and for us to contribute well. So that's why we brought it in. And I'm excited to hear from our panelists who have a wide range of career path experiences and different hearing loss types. And we'll get to meet them in a moment. I just wanted to share with you, what are we covering today in today's session? The panel will cover the emotional aspects of hearing loss, including things like when and if to disclose your hearing loss in the workplace, coping and self-care strategies, as well as accommodations, and particularly from the perspective of the panelists, like what has worked for them, what options have they tried, so that we can hear from firsthand account. And again, what Catherine had shared, please hold your questions to the end. We built in ample time for Q&A. You can also start populating the chat with your questions so that we can start preparing to answer them towards the end of this session. Okay, so now I'd like each panelist to introduce themselves. We heard a lot about your background from Catherine, but please describe yourself. Feel free to share if you're comfortable, the type of hearing loss you might have and the amplification that you use, as well as anything you want us to know about your employment or volunteer or community service work that Catherine may not have touched on already. So why don't we start with Vanessa?
Hi, everyone. My name is Vanessa Kelly. My pronouns are she, her. My visual description is I am a white woman with blue eyes, long red hair. I'm wearing a black turtleneck sweater and I'm against a white background with the HLAA logo. I've been deaf and hard of hearing since birth. I currently use a hearing aid, a cochlear implant, lip reading, and amplification devices to be able to hear. And my day job is a lawyer at a global investment bank. And within that bank, I also serve in leadership positions on our disability network, which is our employee resource group to support employees with disabilities. Thanks.
That's terrific. Thank you. Okay, how about Laura?
Hi everyone, I'm Laura Friedman. I also have medium length red hair, brown eyes. I'm wearing a white shirt today. Some of you, I see some familiar faces. It's really nice to see them. I spent 6 years in the nonprofit space before moving over to the financial services industry, where, as Catherine mentioned, I lead people strategy and engagement initiatives for technology team. I personally don't know when I had a hearing loss from, but I was diagnosed at 3.5 with moderate to severe hearing loss. It has not progressed to date, and I wear hearing aids in both my ears. And thank you so much for having me.
That's great. Thank you. And what about Maria?
I'm getting over a cold. So Maria Laghi, I have ear length brown hair. I'm wearing purple glasses and I have a dark gray top. I have age-related hearing loss, which, like many people who are experiencing an increased challenge in taking in their environment, it was something that I denied for a very long time until I think my mid-60s. So my focus has always been on hearing loss and aging and how that combines in the workplace. I use hearing aids, and I do a lot of lip reading when I'm talking to people, which has been challenged by the use of masks in recent years. So that's my story.
Okay, thank you. And let's have Michelle introduce herself too.
Sure. Hi, I'm Michelle DiStefano. I'm a white woman with brown hair to the shoulders, and I'm wearing a black top with flowers. I'm the director of audiology at CHC, and as we said earlier, I've been working in audiology for 25 years. And basically my role today is to help answer any questions or facilitate how you might be able to get accommodations in the workplace and what the role of your audiologist would be.
Okay, thank you. So let's start the conversation first around the emotional aspects of hearing loss. As we prepared for our session tonight, we really focused on this a bit together. And I wanted to start with Vanessa and followed by Maria. We want to know, how much does acceptance of hearing loss play a role in your success in the workplace in terms of your attitude about hearing loss, the acceptance, maybe even your concerns around the perceptions that others might have around hearing loss, and share that with us if you can, and how that may have evolved over time.
Sure. So my acceptance plays a huge role in my career success, so much so that I would split my career as sort of pre-disclosure and post-disclosure. So for most of my career, law school and my earlier works, which varied from law firm to private investment firm to now a large investment bank, I did not disclose my hearing loss. mostly out of shame. And I'm sure I wasn't hiding it, but I did try to hide it in a variety of different ways and at great personal and physical cost. Thankfully, I came to a realization that that was not working and serving me, and decided to then disclose at my current employer after having been there for 10 years, which was uncomfortable. I felt like I had been dishonest with the firm and with colleagues. But once I did, it totally transformed not only just my professional experience, but my physical and emotional experience as a working professional. And two key ways that it enhanced was really my performance and my professional opportunities. And how that was is, so for performance, my acceptance that I had a hearing loss led to getting proper medical care at CHC. I am, as full disclosure, I am a very satisfied and happy client. I use multiples of their services. But once I had proper medical care, meaning I actually had hearing aids and I was getting speech therapy and I was receiving behavioral health support all at CHC, that allowed me to physically be able to hear. And that, of course, is going to allow me to do my job better. So I actually just had greater access to be able to hear in the workplace in various scenarios. But that acceptance also allowed me to ask for accommodations, which also enhanced my performance, which I'll talk a little bit more in detail about that later. And because I had those accommodations, that lessened my listening fatigue, and that gave me a lot more energy, both in the office, but out of the office as well. And so just accepting that I had a hearing loss and caring for it just dramatically impacted my performance. And I, not to be immodest, but I had had a successful career up to that point. So it's not as if, I was unemployed until I got hearing loss and then I, got care, and then all of a sudden, my career took off. But it was really that the way I could experience and move within my career was enhanced. And the second key way that acceptance really impacted my career was through professional opportunity. So having a sense of acceptance allowed me to raise my hand, self-identify, and join the disability network at my firm, and also be connected to a level of senior level mentors that were connected to the disability network. And both of those opportunities led to me serving in various leadership roles that I would have never otherwise served just as a lawyer. And those roles not only expanded my professional network within the firm, but also outside the firm at our peer banks and peer institutions. But it gave me opportunities to work with senior leaders, and it created a platform for me to become, very public-facing advocate. Now I think I've spoken on over, 35 different public and internal panels and events, and I just never would have had that opportunity, or frankly even found my voice, if I hadn't started with just simply accepting that I had a hearing loss. So it really made a profound impact, and it's why I think it's so important to do the work you need to do to have that acceptance. And it doesn't happen sequentially often. You don't just have acceptance and then decide, I'm going to go get medical care, and I'm going to go do these things and join this organization. Often it's happening in tandem, as Michelle knows, every year. You think you might want to consider a cochlear implant? Nope, not ready yet. And then gradually, I got there. So.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Vanessa. So much of what you said, I personally relate to, the before disclosure, after disclosure, but then the wavering, like, do I really want to be fully disclosed? And then figuring it out as we go. So thank you so much for sharing all of the benefits that you received once you were brave enough to start sharing. And today's environment, I think, is receptive to that a lot more.
More so, for certain. And I'll caveat, for time constraints, I've presented it as if it were, all of a sudden I felt fine and I accepted it. It was a continuum. And I was gradual about how I did it. So first it was just our human resources, and then my boss, and then slowly a group of my colleagues. And now, I'm on my firm's social media. So I've told, over 50,000 people, but it was not, I didn't start at 50,000 people. I started with one, and
Right.
that's okay.
That's really great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'd love to hear from Maria. We've talked a lot about this together, and I'd love you to share with everyone your thoughts around this topic.
I think I've spoken and even written about my own, what they call it, hearing journey. I experienced hearing loss very gradually. It came on insidiously. I didn't know what was happening. I just, like a lot of people, thought that people were mumbling, that situations go to the theater. I couldn't really understand what they were saying. At the same time, I was in a senior position at a performing arts organization and later a film organization, which for which events and social interaction, especially in the role as a fundraiser, was paramount. So I'd also find myself at galas and parties being introduced to people and being in situations where there was a lot of noise, a lot of turmoil and hubbub, where I found myself not being as sharp or as much in the moment as I would have liked. Through all of that, I would not admit to myself that I was losing my hearing. It was the world around me. And I know from working with Carolyn on the subject of hearing and aging that this is a very common attitude because of the misperceptions and the stigma around hearing loss and the use of hearing aids and other tools to communicate better. And around that was the stigma of aging as a professional woman in a very dynamic professional sphere. Since 2010, I've been retired, so I didn't really admit to myself or get a hearing aid until I think until I was retired. And then as I've told people, the primary thing I wanted was a hearing aid that was the least noticeable. I had short hair at the time, so I got really the wrong tool. It was didn't work well. It whistled when the wind blew. It was so uncomfortable, so I didn't use it. So the next step, one is coming to the realization that I had hearing loss, getting tested, and admitting I needed a hearing aid, but not doing it. And I was not a client of CHC then. It just happened that in my retirement, I was consulting, but then I also wanted a volunteer opportunity. And I found CHC and became a volunteer and started to learn. And it was then that I began to understand that I had to kind of admit to myself that not only did I have at that point moderate hearing loss, but I needed to do something real about it, and also kind of to own it. That's what I feel, that I had to own the fact that I had become a person with hearing loss. So I became a client and was fitted with a wonderful hearing aid, which I'm devoted to. What was the second? So as far as my success in the workplace, I kind of winged it in my professional working days because I did not want to be viewed as diminished. But then in my volunteer work, I embraced it. And I've actually, it's opened a lot of doors for me in terms of enjoyment of the arts and social occasions. And then the thing that I call the texture of life, which is a thing you don't realize you're losing, but the everyday little sounds and just the thing that makes the context you're in interesting. So now that I've accepted or come to own my hearing loss, I feel like certainly a much fuller and more productive life. And it's also helped. I mean, I'm lucky I'm volunteering. I volunteer in 2 organizations for which hearing loss is an understood challenge. And I've not felt any difficulty in performing in that sphere.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Maria. It's really remarkable to hear the transformation it sounds like over a period of time, and how different life was before you took steps to accept it more. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. I wanted to ask Laura, if you could comment a little bit about disclosing. You've worked in several different work environments that were very different, and I'm just curious, we're curious to hear about how important is it to disclose in the workplace, and what's that been like for you, and has that changed over time?
So I'm gonna preamble this. There is I work at Citigroup now, a pre-Citi Laura in disclosing and a post-Citi Laura in disclosing. So I'm gonna start with like my early employment years, because from what I've talked to with a lot of peers, and the experience of the early years are not always the greatest, but they're the ones we learn the most from, and then talk a little bit about where I am now and how I've gotten there and learnings. So I've been in the workforce about 15 years. I graduated during a recessionary time, or post-recession, similar to graduating in today's world, where it was hard enough as it was finding a job, and then finding a job and convincing someone to hire me when I'm the only candidate with hearing loss. It was continuously showing itself as something that people weren't so sure about. I was continuously the bridesmaid, not the bride. So the second, we'd get to the final round and the other person would get the job. And that led me to be afraid to disclose, not know when to disclose, not know what accommodations to ask for, because I didn't necessarily know what accommodations to ask for. And if I'm being honest, I wouldn't know anything other than what I know works today. I'm not in tune enough with the various hearing loss and deaf accommodations in the workplace to be able to even advise on that. And I think that's one of the biggest hurdles that a college student coming into the workforce, or someone entering the workforce for the first time, or the first time with a hearing loss, struggles with is, so, okay, I disclosed, they accept my hearing loss, they gave me the job, woohoo. Now they're asking me to tell them what I need to succeed. And then they're also in the same vein telling me all these things that I think I need to succeed are incompatible with their IT system. I don't know anything. Like, how am I supposed to navigate this? How are we supposed to navigate this? So I went, depending on the points of my career, I went through phases of disclosing, not disclosing, partially disclosing, not asking for everything I needed, being felt bad about for needing something that was expensive. I did previously work in a nonprofit space where, funds are limited. But I've also had a variety of situations, which I'm happy to share, where they're less than kosher, and probably the person who said something or did something in the workplace wasn't educated enough about how to accommodate and be an ally and inclusive of someone with hearing loss. But I also didn't speak out. And I think, so I'm going to fast forward. I joined the team that I'm in now right before COVID. And I like flew through the interview process. And when I say it's like the perfect fit, it really was. And it really showed itself. It was like really great. But I forgot to disclose that I had hearing loss at any point in the interview process. And before I took the job, I met with my boss who was hiring me, and I let him know I had hearing loss. And his response was, "Oh, well, you're gonna be on the phone a lot." And that was it. And I tried and tried and tried to get the accommodation process going. Let's just say HR didn't know how to navigate it either. No one knew how to navigate it. Everyone wanted to help, but no one knew how to navigate it. And so I went from working in the hearing loss space and the disability space and being an advocate, as many of you've been in the room with me at Victor Calisa's office down at City Hall, to like going to a corporate job and wanting to like not be the token hearing loss disability advocate person, and then being thrust into this hot seat of I'm in a unique position working in technology to guide city through how to be more inclusive of people with disabilities by sharing what not to do. And it was a complete like 180, like out of body experience of having like the perfect bosses who are the biggest advocates, being surrounded by people with the problem solving mentality. Technologists, they see a problem. If there's a solution, they want to nail it and they want to make it better and they want to move on to the next problem. But being in an infrastructure that wasn't designed to accommodate my needs. And then flash forward, I'm going to speed this up a little bit to COVID. COVID hit. We're coming back into the workplace physically, and we're all wearing masks. I already went through an experience of going to a bank to get a mortgage during COVID and not being able to hear the banker through the mask, and having my mom, who I've never needed to translate an entire conversation for me, translating an entire conversation for me. It was like very humbling and also really discouraging and like scary to realize I can't navigate in this world without lip reading. Going back to the workforce, dealing with, I have a lot of colleagues from India, from China, with accents. My boss is Indian, but American, major accents and thick accents and Zoom calls. And I'm supposed to sit in a conference room with half the team on Zoom, half the team wearing masks, and understand the word that's going on and do my job. And I looked at my boss, I was like, I can't do this. And I spoke to him about like the problem of masks, and I ended up being in like this the CIO's town hall that next quarter, talking about my experience with hearing loss and like how to be inclusive given our new environment and like the problem with masks. So I went from like being afraid to needing anything to people asking me, is your systems working? Because I know our infrastructure doesn't always work all the time. And so having allies in the workplace and people and creating those relationships with good people, they exist, it's been hugely beneficial for me. And they still don't get it right all the time, but they want to. And I think that's really had been to change my mentality in the workplace.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Laura. That's really remarkable around how different work environments have really forced you to face the hearing loss and be brave about sharing and speaking up. And even when you join a large corporation with a lot of resources, it sounds like we still have to be strong and educate and keep raising awareness. It's really wonderful that you're getting what you need now and the organization is embracing you. It's just such a great example of the benefit of disclosing, but at the same time, it sounds like you've had to be very knowledgeable about your own hearing loss and your own needs in order to educate others. And it's just great. Like one example is Laura and I are partnering together to do a lunch and learn to raise awareness around hearing loss at City through one of the employee networks that Laura is the leader of. So that's just another way that Laura's, continuing to be a trailblazer in that area. So thank you for sharing that with us. I wanted to give Michelle a chance just to join us for a few minutes to share with us how an audiologist might be able to help people succeed in the workplace. And if she wants to please share an example of how you do this, and maybe some of your colleagues as well, and what they would do to help out.
Certainly. Just to go a little bit off of what Maria and Laura were saying, though, the audiologist's job, in my opinion, is to help you on your hearing journey. So it's not just to like sell you a hearing aid, fit a hearing aid. It's to fit your needs and your communication needs. And sometimes those go beyond hearing aids. But as an audiologist, I don't necessarily know the accommodation you need or what you need unless you really voice that. There's a myriad of accommodations I could give you and suggest to you. So what you have to remember is to partner with your audiologist. You have to tell them. And if you have an audiologist who's not sure, ask where they can refer you to, because you have to tell them what you need. For example, if you're, I have a client who I recently needed to be able to use the phone often. She has hearing aids that are Bluetooth compatible, but the device that they had, the phone they had using was not Bluetooth compatible on the same Bluetooth wave. And it was a learning experience for both of us, but I wound up finding what adapter she needed to be able to have a Bluetooth headset that would work best over her hearing aid, so that then she could Bluetooth into any phone that she connected to. So I didn't know that. I didn't learn that in school, but once they told me what was needed, then I was able to then move forward and find something. I know Carolyn was voicing recently that somebody was asking about stethoscopes. We get asked that a lot too. Bluetooth hearing aids allow you to use Bluetooth stethoscopes, but a Bluetooth stethoscope might not be the best option for you. So a lot of times I may not necessarily even know, but there are other people who may know who have been in the same situation. So either I reach out, as far as even the stethoscopes, I direct people to the Association of Medical Professionals with Hearing Loss. It's an amazing website. They list out stethoscopes they've tried, other devices they've tried. They know more than I would over it. So I think one of the things that I really would love for to be a take home is that you don't know the accommodations that you can have, and you don't know what it is we could do for you. But unless you voice to me and say, I'm having trouble on the telephone, or, I have to do a lot of Zoom calls. And in order to do those Zoom calls, I need to be able to connect in some way. And the connection I have now is not working. And sometimes it's the tiniest thing of like, go to Best Buy and buy a little Bluetooth dongle. And sometimes it's way more complicated than that. So I think, to me, the best thing to do is to be able to make sure you partner with your audiologist. Let them know what you need. Even if you think it's minor, even if you say, I'm at a conference table and I have one client who, she's a nurse and she has trouble in a specific OR every time she goes. Only because she was complaining about this OR was I able to then say to her, that on your app, on your phone, you actually can create an individual program for that OR. So she then went into the OR. She had people speak to her in there. She adjusted it until she heard well, and she saved it as the OR number. And every time she steps into that OR, she does that. She wouldn't have known that unless I helped her know it, but I had no idea she was having trouble in those specific situations. So I think the best thing to say is that you need to really partner with your audiologist. An audiologist's job is to help you communicate better. It's not to sell you a hearing aid that's going to sit in your drawer. It's not to have you wear a hearing aid that amplifies everything. Technology now is amazing. It should not make everything louder. You should be able to really get speech as a preference. And so you have to voice to them what you need, and then it's their job to kind of help you along to achieve that. Laura, you have your hand up, I think.
Yeah. Laura,
Yes,
thank
you
you, Michelle.
reminded me 100%, Michelle. Everything you said is 100% true. And I know that adapter device super well. And so it made me smile with some of your answers there. You did remind me of one thing. So I did mention I work with a lot of people with accents. We're on Zoom today. Some people have their cameras off. A lot of people don't like putting their cameras on at work 100% of the time. And especially when I speak with someone who speaks really fast or has a really thick accent that is already hard for me, I advocate for myself on those one-off situations. I'm like, I need you to put your I don't care what you look like. Like, this is not recorded. I need you to put your camera on. I need you to speak slowly. Otherwise, I'm going to have a hard time understanding, and we're going to be on this call for a long time. And I explain, and everyone's usually really like, they're like, oh, I forgot. Or like, yeah, no problem. Give me 5 minutes. So be really forthfront, and stern might not be the right answer, but confident in voicing what you need and when you need it, even when it sometimes feels a little uncomfortable, because then there isn't always leeway for someone to like be like, oh, well, my hair, I just got out of the shower, or like, you want to make sure that people understand that, like, no, I need X, Y, and Z. Otherwise, this phone call or this situation that we're in isn't going to work for me. And it will be mutually non-beneficial. So I just wanted to add to that little bit, because it's really, for me, that's been a very important takeaway in the workplace.
And just to add to what Laura's saying, if you find that they tell you no, so even captioning, especially Laura was saying when you first get out of school, right? When you first get out of college, even captioning in college, they allow you captioning. There's disability departments, they allow it. In the workforce, they're supposed to allow you that as well. And now there's speech to text apps, there's captioning on Google phones, there's captioning in an iPhone. If they tell you that you can't caption, or you can't have a phone out, or tell your audiologist, and we can write a letter that says it's medically necessary for you to have that. And then they have to honor that letter that we wrote, because it's within our scope of practice to do so. So if you're getting any pushback, sometimes turn to your audiologist and say, what can you do for me to be able to push this along? And they'll take it from the professional, medical professional over you sometimes asking. And so you just remember, you have to just reach out, and they're there and have the tools to do that.
This is so helpful. Michelle, thank you so much for sharing some of those really concrete examples of how audiologists can really make a difference in the workplace, so that the individual with the hearing loss isn't shouldering all the responsibility. I know I felt like that a lot, like that I had to solve all the problems. And it was just such a relief to get some professional help in that area. And Laura, I thought you made such a good point around, because I was listening to you, I'm like, how is she so confident? Like, how is she so confident in telling these people, like, if we're going to work together, you have to step up too. You have to make it mutually beneficial. I thought was such a great way to phrase it, because everyone's time is important and your contributions are important. And so anyway, I really appreciate what you've shared in terms of the strength, and hopefully we can all take some of that back when we're feeling a little hesitant, to remember that we're all worthy of that extra patience, and just a few extra minutes, and then everyone will all benefit from that. I wanted to jump, so we talked a lot about accommodations. I just wanted to know, Vanessa, did you want to add anything to the accommodation discussion about any unique solutions that you might have learned over time that you wanted to share, or anything about advocating in your workplace for your needs?
Sure. Well, first of all, I agree with everything that has been shared so far. I also would just stress that as you're thinking about the accommodations that you may need, one, I cannot stress enough how important it is to work with your medical team. And I think we have a coming up question where I'll talk more about that. But the other is to really find a community of people that can give you ideas of what they may or may not use. Because while it's important to know that what other people use or don't use, you are not required to need or not need. So if you're in a workplace and it says, well, so-and-so has a hearing loss and they don't need X, not relevant, not relevant. These are individual So from that perspective, what other people do or don't do, as you know, as our moms would say, that's not your business. Like, don't pay attention to that. Pay attention to your, you know, your paper. But it is relevant and it is your business to the extent that it gives you ideas, confidence, inspiration, a sense of entitlement or validation. I mean, entitlement in the positive way. That is critical. And if that is where you are in your journey, where having that will support you in asking for those accommodations, seek that out, whether that is in organizations like the HLAA, this chapter, or other similarly situated organizations, or whether you create that organically or you find it on Facebook or another social media. But finding your people and understanding what works for them and what, you know, what they've done to overcome, that is such valuable information that can really help you get the courage and also just get some data. Because some of my best solutions that I've had in my workplace have come from other colleagues that have hearing loss that have said, you know, you can do X, Y, or Z, and I didn't know. And then that ended up being really helpful. Or, you know, I can imagine if I was at the beginning of my journey and I had just listened to Laura, like I would be like, oh, I have to have coffee with her. And then I just need to download all that confidence and all that knowledge and then bring that into my discussion with my employers. So I would just highlight the importance of having connectivity to your medical team and having connectivity to a community.
Thank you.
Can I add something to what
Oh.
Vanessa said? I'm sorry.
Sure.
So
Oh,
one
sure.
thing I also didn't mention was when I was at City, I got new hearing aids. So the reason why I laughed at what Michelle said about the adapters, when I wore my previous hearing aids, which had a streamer, I was able to use an adapter device or a dongle to connect the Bluetooth to my computer. And so we use a cloud-based platform. I won't bore you. And I was able to seamlessly at the office just connect my streamer to the dongle to the computer. But when I got my new hearing aids, which had the Bluetooth built in, they don't connect to a dongle. And so that I had to redo all my accommodations unexpectedly. And so we learned all at the same time what worked and what didn't work with my new hearing aids. And I think Michelle, you were part of that solution for me, and it was less than optimal, but we learned that I just needed to connect Bluetooth to the computer and I needed my own laptop, and that has been my solution ever since. So my solution previously didn't translate into being my solution now at the same place, being the same person, and it's okay to ask for new solutions and accommodations. But I also taught the accessibility team, and I'm sure Goldman has a similar one, that people with the same disability have different solutions and they're going to change at different times of their lives. And it also is subjective to the type of hearing aid or cochlear implant. When I say type, like the brand. Each brand is different, even within the same brands like me, each model is different. So really don't be afraid. It's okay to go back and ask again and say, well, what was previously reasonable is not currently reasonable because my circumstances changed. So don't be afraid to go back to square one and start over if you need to.
Thank you
I
for
couldn't
sharing.
agree more. And I'm so sorry, I'm going to add one last bit. The other
Sure.
thing is, in addition to saying these may change, when you're first asking and it's the first time you've gotten accommodations, it's completely appropriate. And I would even recommend that whatever you ask, like that's your opening gambit, and you make it very clear, we're going to try this, and then I'm going to check back in and let you know how it's working. And if X isn't enough, I'm going to need X and Y. Or if, you know, whatever reason, not so much that the, I mean, it has to work for both, right? For both the employer and the employee. But it's really important that you don't just get one chance to ask and then you can't change it. And it's totally fine to say, I'd like to try this and see how it's working and then come back. This is, as Laura said, it's a dynamic, evolving process that changes based on your physical needs, technology, the way your job may change, the way, team dynamics change. There's a whole host of things. So I recommend when you're having those conversations, frame them as this is an ongoing, revisited dialogue, which we will continue to have, not a one-time discussion that now everyone's going to be annoyed if I have to come back with further adjustments or feedback.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing. Just from my conversation with Vanessa, you become so seasoned at this point, and I'm glad that you were able to share a lot of that with us tonight. And what I was hearing between Laura's additional comment and yours, Vanessa, is people with hearing loss probably make the best, not actually probably, do make the best employees because we're persistent. We don't give up, right? We have to be brave. And when we hear no, we have to turn it into a yes, right? And that's what I'm hearing with your examples. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. I just want to be mindful of time. It's almost 7. So I wanted to give the audience a chance to ask some questions. We just have just a little bit left we didn't really have a chance to cover the self-care section. So I just wanted to give Vanessa a chance to talk about this, because one of the themes that came up as we prepared for tonight was how taxing hearing loss can feel, and physically and emotionally, when we're communicating all day in a variety of different settings, types of meetings, etc., trying to keep up with accents. And we all kind of agreed that we all needed to practice some type of self-care. And I just wanted give Vanessa a chance to comment on that with any suggestions she might have.
Sure. Well, thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to encourage everyone to go to the HLAA New York City chapter website, where we have all of our prior monthly meetings recorded, because they're all fantastic. But I did do a presentation last year on wellness strategies for hearing loss, in which I talk in depth about yoga, meditation, and nature practice. And those are my big 3 go-tos. But I also encourage you to check out all of the other wonderful content on the website, including just a number of wonderful programs that we've had. But if you want to learn more about any of those 3 modalities, that is one option to go there. So the other thing that I would highlight, other than finding practices that support your body, your physical body, and your emotional wellness, for me, that looks like yoga, meditation, and nature practice. But other things that I have put considerable time and effort into is my community and my relationships. It's so important to have nurturing community and relationships to be able to support you for, sometimes having a disability can be a challenge. Sometimes it can be, a really wonderful, expansive growth process, but you'll want really lovely, supportive people around you. The other thing that I find very a form of self-care is advocacy, is being able to support others and advocate for others and create, within my work environment, environments that are more inclusive for people with hearing loss or all kinds of disability. And lastly, I would say, which, I often don't hear, is the importance of behavioral health support. And so finding a therapist, that to me, it looked like a therapist. It may look like to you, maybe a religious figure or, some other type of, but really somebody who can help you understand the emotional impact and process, how you're seeing yourself, how you're understanding, your body's needs, and, the challenges that can be living in largely, an ableist, inaccessible world. That to me was so critical as part of my self-care, just to have a place where I was validated and also a safe place to just find my confidence and my voice. And, I would really recommend you try to work with a therapist that understands disability. All therapists, I'm sure, are competent, but this feels really important. And CHC's team is a team that does that. And it's been a huge, huge additive to my mental and physical well-being.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Vanessa. I personally have found a lot of the things that you have mentioned has helped me a lot in my life, dealing with the significant hearing loss and high pressure roles in my career. I also just wanted to mention that CHC does have a support group for adults, most of who are working, and that is available. I can share that information in the chat. If anyone would like more information, I'll share my email as well as Michelle, and you can reach out to us. We have a mental health department with counselors, social workers, clinical psychologists, and a psychiatrist as well, if that's could be helpful to anyone. Catherine, I see your hand up. I guess is this the time to switch to the Q&A? And I just didn't know if you had something you wanted to also add to the conversation.
No, there is something I want to ask. The only person who has mentioned captions is Michelle. And if I had had access to the captioning apps that I have now when I was still in the workplace, including cell phone captions, captions on Otter and Google Live Transcribe for in-person meetings, hearing loops installed in conference rooms, I would probably still be working today. I retired the same year Maria, 2010. And when I left, there weren't any accommodations I knew to ask for. So I would love to know, if I think it would be great if all of you could be part of educating your not only your fellow employees with hearing loss, but your HR departments with what kinds of things are available to really enable people with hearing loss to hear. I think most of us know that you really, no matter how great your hearing aid and cochlear implant is, you need more. So, and if I'd like to hear whether that's been discussed among yourselves or with your.
Catherine, I'd love to address the captioning. Not question, but comment. So when I first joined City, we used Skype and we didn't have Zoom, and no one really had video. For some reason, Skype video never worked. And they were supposed to have captioning with Skype. And then they were, even before COVID, but I think was accelerated by COVID, eventually going to move over to Zoom. But let's just say accommodating was not at the forefront because they were never challenged on it until I joined. And because I worked in technology and on the floor with the head of the accessibility tech unit, I had a little bit more of a voice, as well as my boss and his boss. Then COVID came around, they rolled out Zoom captioning, and then they give it and took it just as fast because City, being a financial institution, was concerned with having transcripts of really confidential meetings. And if it's transcript, then they have to be kept for 7 years for financial records. And even though, and they were navigating the legalities of all that. But at the same time, I'm sure I needed it for an accommodation. And I should have probably brought Michelle in with that note that she talked about. So it's really great to know that I could have brought, at the time I was Ellen's patient. There was something to be done there, but I didn't know that. So I love that you shared that if your employer is, making it difficult, that, go talk to your audiologist and get a medical note. And eventually I got captioning back. But yeah, captioning makes a huge difference for me. It's not perfect, when I don't have Lauren, who's like, perfectly perfect when it comes to captions. AI is perfectly imperfect, but it's better than nothing. So do ask for captions. Do ask people to put their video camera on when you're having Zoom conversations. And yeah, I just wanted to make it sure that you knew that I take captions seriously.
I completely agree with Laura, and I was going to add, Catherine, that texting has been tremendously helpful. FaceTime, video calls is also just so helpful. I would spend hours on conference calls, on global conference calls, not seeing a person for hours. It was just so difficult. So yes, it's for me, it's been a huge plus. Even if it's not perfect, it does give me, it relaxes me. Like, I feel like I have it as a backup. Okay, I know it's not perfect, but at least I can like check it, see if I heard that right. So anyway, so Vanessa, so anyway, I just want to thank the panelists so much for sharing so much of yourself tonight. And Michelle, sharing your expertise in terms of what we should expect from our audiologists. And so I'm going to hand it over now to Vanessa and Catherine, who will manage the Q&A at this point.
Oh, actually, Vanessa, can you see the order that people are lined up to ask their questions?
Yes, the David Weinberg is the first one, Catherine.
David, John Taylor, Gail Weiss, Adelaide Zabriskie are the ones who I see. So go ahead, you can monitor it.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. This has been a terrific panel. I am a 62-year-old male. I've been wearing hearing aids since I was 5. You talked about disclosure. For me, it was evident because I couldn't hear it. I couldn't camouflage it with, hair or hairstyle. Anyway, what I wanted to talk about was workplace, the physical setting. I'm an architect, and I've been doing workplace design the majority of my career. And I have tried, and I probably have done offices for, I've done offices for Citi, for Goldman. So I've probably done some of the spaces you've worked in. And I've always advocated to clients on the importance of acoustics and recognizing that open plan is perhaps the most challenging plan for those of us with this disability. And so often, it falls, no pun intended, on deaf ears. So I think, a big part of what we need to do as advocates is talk to our IT departments, talk to our HR departments. And some of us work at small companies, some of us work at, global companies. But we need to be more familiar with the technologies that are available to us, because most often HR and IT don't know, and they don't even know where to start. I'll just share that I'm in the process of getting new hearing aids now, and in all my years of wearing hearing aids, it's never been this challenging in trying to match the different technologies. I just want to be able to match my hearing aids with my laptop so that I can use Bluetooth and be able to hear, conversations that are on calls. But because there's such a wealth of different technologies available, that ability to zero in has become more and more challenging. So I think, one thing we could do is go to the hearing aid manufacturers and try to get them to have more of a common line approach to how they integrate technology with other technologies that are found in the workplace.
Can I answer that quickly for you? So the good news is that's coming. So we know just and like I said, talk with your audiologist a bit too, because we know what's coming down the line is that they're trying to make Bluetooth more uniform, and that they're all on the same kind of megahertz. So talk with your audiologist, because sometimes it depends on how new your Bluetooth is. For the newest hearing aids, sometimes it's a matter of just firmware to your device, your hearing aid, your cochlear implant. But we do know from what we've been allowed to hear from manufacturers that they're trying to do that at this point. So
Okay,
it's coming.
well, it would be great if they could speed it up. I think, what I have found is theater consultants seem to be on the forefront of integrating technology for the hearing impaired. And what I've been doing is reaching out to those consultants to see how they can start to focus on improving acoustics in the workplace.
Thank you, David. That was a really helpful insights and sharing. I would also add that during your advocacy in the workplace, as David very thoughtfully suggested, also look to your right and left of your colleagues, consider intersectionality. So for example, if you're arguing that an open plan workplace is challenging for you, it's likely also challenging for your neurodiverse colleagues.
Mhm. Yes.
And you can join with other colleagues who maybe do not have hearing loss, but also have experiences similar to yours or limitations similar to yours inside of a specific environment or with a specific type of technology or a specific setup. So it's really important to look, up and out sometimes to find allies within the disability community, but sometimes outside. So captions not only help me as being deaf or hard of hearing, but it helps my colleagues who hear perfectly, but that the spoken language of the meeting is not their first language, of which there are many. It also helps my colleagues who have auditory processing issues. They hear perfectly, but they have auditory processing issues. So it's really important that when you're asking for your accommodations, you're not required to say they're only valid if they also help other people, but it can be a persuasive additive to say, and others benefit. This is not just for me, it's for me, but others benefit as well. And that's how we see that disability is never just an individual issue, that it impacts all of us. So
Yeah, a big part of that is educating clients on the importance of neurodiverse design, universal design. Most people think the buck stops with ADA, and it doesn't.
right,
It needs to go a
right.
lot further.
Absolutely. John, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you for this. Just a couple of comments, questions. I had the good fortune of not working in an office very much, but the little time that it did, some of the issues were speaking on the phone. The office phones were not necessarily, did not have a lot of amplification. They certainly didn't have captions. And, maybe you can discuss that. The other thing is in meetings, I sometimes found a conference mic on the table to be helpful, and maybe you can talk about that as well. Thank you.
So the fortunate thing about, I do know people use the phones still, like the physical phone. I personally don't. I have every phone call. If you need to talk to me, you call me on Zoom. So every phone call goes through my laptop, and then I can set the volume controls there. And so that's usually beneficial. We actually just moved, they reshuffled the floor. So I just moved desk. And when they had a phone call about, they call it a restack, about the reshuffling, I had already voiced 3 times that I got a special desk setup that's just mine, even though we're in the open floor plan. And I was like, no, I don't think you get it. I need a quiet spot, not with a lot of traffic, where I'm not one of 6 on a desk, that I have my own desk and it's mine. And I don't need it. These are all the things I don't need that you can save money on. And these are all the things that I already have that need to be transferred. And I said that on a corporate call with 300 people, and people came up to me and said, I'm so glad someone said something, because my colleague is blind and has this setup, and they just didn't have an inventory. Not every team has the inventory list of everyone who has accommodations. So sometimes things come across as tone deaf, and it's just a lack of awareness. I know I'm going off a little bit on the topic, but getting back to the phone, if you're able to move to Zoom or utilize your personal device, therefore you could have Bluetooth in it. For those of you who have Bluetooth compatibility, by all means, you should advocate for people to call you on a system that is most accessible to you. I know that's not 10 years ago, Bluetooth didn't exist in my hearing aids, so it's a lot has changed in the last 10 years, even the last 5 years or the last year, and but for the better. So now having more technology at our disposal only enhances our ability to do the work that we know we can do.
Absolutely. And John, I'll just add, I was so glad that you mentioned microphones. This is the thing that I always say was a complete life changer for me. I did have a Bluetooth microphone with my hearing aids, but I I wasn't really comfortable using it, or I feel like it wasn't as functional. The one I have now that goes with my CI, absolute life changer. Not only can I go out to dinner into a loud restaurant and hear my husband perfectly, but I can bring it to the theater and hear the teleloop. I can go do yoga and Pilates. I can have the instructor wear it. So it's opened up all of these things. And in the workplace, I can also use it in a large conference room or one-on-one. So I really encourage you to look and see if your particular device has that capability and if it's financially feasible to purchase that, because it really can open up accessibility options for you inside and outside of the workplace.
And just to
Yeah.
add to what Vanessa's saying as
Oh,
the
sorry, please.
audiologist, the most hearing aids now have a remote microphone. So you don't have to have an elaborate system like an FM system. They have a remote microphone, and a lot of them have a point ability, which means you don't necessarily have to have the person wear it. You actually can point it in the direction of the speaker and it will zoom in on them talking. So you want to always ask if you're, and that's a much more cost-effective way than an entire what used to be an FM system where you had to wear a separate device on your hearing aid. So they typically will have a remote mic. So 90% of my clients will not do well in every situation with just their hearing aids or their cochlear implant, and some assistive device is worth it to get. So always remember, ask about that.
Gail.
Okay. Anyhow, I worked for quite a while for a magazine, and I did a lot of interviewing, to write articles. And I had a caption phone, so the word was out that I had hearing loss. But the main problem that I seem to have is that a lot of my coworkers just didn't get it. I did not modulate my voice sufficiently on the phone. And I got a certain, fair amount of criticism, for that, for not paying attention as much as I should. And my question is, how did you go about educating your coworkers about hearing loss?
That's a
Do you-
great question. Laura, do you want to?
Vanessa, you take it, but I definitely have a couple of things I want to add.
Okay. Well, one, I would say how each person talks about their own hearing loss, when and to whom, is a deeply personal decision that you need to make based on your individual working situation, as well as just your emotional resourcing and how comfortable you are discussing it. But assuming that you are, um, I have found what works, and I can only speak what works well for me, is that I have had the most success when I've been proactive, as Ruth advocates, to get in front of it and be able to proactively tell people. And that may be, at the beginning of working together as a project in the frame of access needs, just want everyone to know this is what I'm going to need as we meet, and work on this project. Or it can be formal. When I joined my recent new group in my legal division, was at our team meeting. I just announced it in the meeting. I talked about it. So I couldn't have done that earlier in my career. Or you meet with specific colleagues one-on-one. You may only tell your manager and say, I don't want to talk about it with anyone else. The problem, if you don't, and of course I respect everyone's decision because it's a private, personal decision, is that if you don't, often the thing you're most concerned about, which is being misunderstood or having it be a much bigger deal, happens because you don't talk about it. So then something happens, either you missed something you didn't understand, and now you're in a defensive position explaining that, no, it wasn't that I wasn't paying attention in the meeting, I couldn't hear. Or you're doing it in the middle of something and it's disruptive and you become very self-conscious about that. And you might not be received in a way that you'd want to be received because people aren't prepared and in the right frame of mind. Versus if you say, I'd like to meet with you, I'd like to share, X, and here's how you can best support me, and I want to allow you to ask some questions. People are likely going to be a lot more receptive. So I would advocate being proactive and looking at the situation. If you feel like where you need to go in may not be the most supportive, bring support in. If you feel like maybe your manager won't be supportive, you bring HR in with you. Or you talk to a mentor. I work through what I had to say to certain people on my team with my therapist. I did dry runs, and that's how I got comfortable. So again, make your own decision that works best for you, but highly recommend being proactive, because that's just when I've seen the best results.
Yeah.
But
I'm so glad you
Totally
went
agree.
first.
yeah.
Maria, please go.
Can I just add, in my statements about hearing loss with aging, I think in my experience, it's always been best when I hijack the conversation and I let the person know in whatever is appropriate in the context that I have hearing loss. I don't say outright, so don't think I'm just getting old and addled and confused. I don't say that. But what I do want to get across is that I'm in control. I'm aware of not diminished ability. It can be, it's not viewed as a disability, but as a diminished ability that you are unconsciously talking too loud or not responding, and that it can be viewed as something, that you're not really in control of the situation and your own participation in whatever work you're doing. I think by being proactive in whatever way suits the particular context shows that you are aware, you are in control, and that just a slight change in attitude and acceptance can make a big difference.
I want to echo both what Vanessa and add something to both what Vanessa and Maria said, because you are in control. And something that when we were preparing for this panel, I mentioned that I wanted to make sure that if there's any youngins and recent college graduates or someone who's just really struggling in the workplace on this call or listening to the recording, that they come out of this panel with actionable tips to how to navigate what is like a very daunting part of the career, which is getting started. I'd say my personal journey wasn't easy in the beginning, and I'm happy anyone wants to reach out to me to share that. But being proactive and having a sense of confidence doesn't just happen overnight. But something I have learned the hard way is that early in my career, I once got ripped apart for not providing really good notes or meeting minutes. And instead of being self-aware that I probably wasn't the best person to do the meeting minutes, even if I'm the most junior person on the team, and even if that's typically the role of like the junior person on the team, I've gotten to a place where I had say to my boss, like, I come with my deficits on my ears. I know what they are. You know what they are. I bring all these benefits and all these assets. Letting you know now, even if I'm the most junior person in the room, you probably don't want me taking notes. And there's a gazillion acronyms at Citi. And like I said, I work with a lot of foreigners, a lot of people with accents. They also come with names of all shapes and sizes. Whenever we talk, my boss is like, "Oh, reach out to so-and-so." And I'm like, "Huh?" He's like, I'll email you. And like, being proactively advocating for yourself and in a really nonchalant, it's not about being serious about it all the time. It's just being, hey, hi, remember who you're talking to. Really does help. And it really takes some of the pressure off your colleagues when you do approach talking to them in I'd say in like a less serious way about your hearing loss, because they're scared. They don't want to do the wrong thing. They don't want to ask you the wrong thing. They don't want to ask an inappropriate question. like allyship comes in a lot of shapes and forms, and we see this with other demographic groups in the workforce and in our personal lives. We want people to feel like they can approach us and ask questions and inform questions and learn. And that means learning about what works for us, what might not work for us, how they can best meet your needs in the workplace, and when you're maybe out at happy hour. There's a lot of different scenarios. So it's just sometimes having like a lighthearted attitude when advocating for yourself goes a long way of taking some of the burden off your colleagues feeling the pressure.
Absolutely. I'm conscious of time, and I know Adelaide has had a hand up for a bit, so I'm wanting to make sure that we get to them.
I've joined this board here in town, thinking that I am hearing so well, but the meetings are at a rectangular table. And so I purchased on my own the Phonak table mic, very expensive, very expensive. And so now so there's no alternative except a rectangular table. And now they're expanding the board from 8 to 15. I'm seriously thinking of resigning. I guess I want to talk about rectangular boards because yeah. So
The audiologist answer that one. Wait, you don't have to resign. So the fortunate thing about a table mic is that you actually can patch other mics into it. So, talk to your audiologist, or if you audiologist isn't sure, you can call the technical services at CHC. We somehow find this answer. But you can patch other mics into your table mic so that if they are expanding it, then you can put another mic closer to where the other speakers are on the longer thing, and it patches into the table mic. So there's a way to get around that.
Okay.
Hardwire or wirelessly. There's 2 ways to do it.
Yep, exactly. I had the same exact, I was on a large university board, and I had the same exact issue. And I mean, obviously I don't know what company your board is, but they were able to just hook my mic right into the mics for all of the speakers. And we were in a gigantic, it was probably a 30-person board. And it made all the difference. It was like people were speaking right into my ears. So there's definitely a solution.
Okay.
Ruth, I love you having the last word. We have 4 minutes left, and I can't think of a better person to bring us out.
I want to tell an old story and a new story. When I was in my last paid position in the 1980s, I was a convention and meeting planner. And I too had meetings to go to. And I came to CHC, and in order to tell the staff that I had a hearing loss, I worked with Nancy Nadler then, and we wrote a memo, and we distributed it to everybody. And that at least clued them into the fact that I wasn't being deaf, dumb, and stupid when I didn't answer properly. The news story is this morning I went to the Apple store because I'm having trouble with my Apple Watch. And I introduced myself to the genius, and I told him that I'm a bionic great-grandmother. And he looked at me and he said, I will type for you. I didn't have to ask. And then when the typing became burdensome for him, I said, how about we use live transcribe? And he took out his phone, and that did the trick. The obvious thing here is that I immediately identified myself as somebody who needed help. And this young man was terrific. I was really, really pleased. So saying what you need is the key
Yeah.
to this whole thing. And all I can tell you is that I've been doing this for a very long time. Only once was I turned down by somebody when I handed out an assistive listening device. That's 50 years. And I've been going around with assistive listening devices of all kinds. So don't be afraid to speak up. And people are willing, and your audiologist, and in CHC's case, the technical department is wonderful in keeping us plugged in.
Brava. Catherine, I'm going to turn it back over to you to close us out.
Okay, yes, my dog is barking. I think said that he never does. I just want to thank the panel. This was a terrific discussion and really wonderful questions. And concluding with Ruth always is a real plus. Ruth, thank you for those two wonderful anecdotes. Our next meeting, our April meeting, is devoted to captions, and we have Tina Childress as our speaker. She's very great speaker. She knows everything about captions, including we'll also be talking about captions on television and how to complain to the FCC, and in addition to some of the points we've touched on today. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming, and thank you to our panelists. This was just a really wonderful, very professional presentation, and it was lots of fun to listen to. So thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Well, take care.